Hello, good morning. I'm going to talk to you about something a little bit different this morning, which is security culture eating human risk for breakfast. My name is Noora Ahmed Moshe, and I work as a senior product manager at Hoxhunt. At Hoxhunt, we are on a mission to help leaders and employees to join forces together to prevent data breaches. And we do that by lowering human risk. The title of this talk today, Security Culture Eats Human Risk for Breakfast, is obviously a nod to the famous Peter Drucker quote, culture eats strategy for breakfast. In cybersecurity, as in any area of your business, you need a really strong strategy. I think it's super important to have a very well put together and well thought through strategy. But it's never going to get implemented. It's never going to really take if you don't have the right culture in place to support it. What I would like for you to take away from this talk today is that that is as much true in cybersecurity as it is in any other area of your business. In its simplest form, your culture is your people. So let's talk about people. Unfortunately, your people are your biggest cybersecurity risk. Yes, of course, in terms of our cybersecurity strategy, we need a very strong technical layer. We need to have all the possible protections in place that we can have to protect those threats from coming in. But whatever we do, some threats will always come in, and they'll come in through the human layer. In fact, 74% of cybersecurity breaches involve a human element. That's actually a conservative estimate. Most analyses put it actually higher than that, but it is at least that, so a lot. And this number includes like all the kind of ways that hackers actually exploit our very humanness. So social engineering, phishing, weak passwords, improper storing and sharing of data, and so forth and so on. It's no surprise that the hackers are doing it for money. Obviously, 95% of breaches are financially motivated, and it's very expensive for business. The average cost of a data breach this year has been about $4.5 million US. But in some cases, the cost of breach can be even much, much higher. Many of you probably know about the attack that took place at the MGM Hotel and Resort in Las Vegas earlier on this autumn. Basically, the cost of that breach rose up to $100 million US. And when you look at what the attackers were able to achieve, it's not really surprising to see that it cost them that much money. The attackers were able to take down loads of MGM's vital systems for several days on end. They managed to get the key cards to stop working, so guests couldn't get into their hotel rooms. They were able to disrupt the check-in systems at the hotel lobby, so they had to literally check in people to the hotel using pen and paper, writing down credit card numbers with a pen on a piece of paper. They weren't able to take orders in the restaurant or pay out winnings in the machines, so it was total chaos. I don't think it's something that any of us would ever want to walk into in our place of work and see happening. We don't know the exact ins and outs of how the attack took place, but it is widely believed that this started with phishing. So basically, phishing by voice, by phone call. So the attacker managed to gain access to information with which they were able to get into the systems by manipulating the MGM help desk staff over the phone. And what I think this case really illustrates is that cybersecurity is something that we mostly think of as a technical problem, but it is actually a human problem. It's a people problem, and that makes it into a culture problem. So I like to think of culture in terms of three lenses: behavior, knowledge, and attitude. Our behavior in our culture are things that we know widely that we have to adhere to, like things like being punctual, being polite to other people, or extra nice things like buying birthday cakes for your colleagues at the office when you know it's their birthday. Those are the ways that our culture manifests itself in our behavior. In cybersecurity culture, the behaviors that we're looking for are things like adhering to all your company policies, using good passwords, putting on your VPN, following all the protocols that are in place in your place of work. But also behaviors that you manifest when you're not thinking about cybersecurity. You're not in that context of thinking whether you should be putting in a password or something like that, but in your midst of your normal flow of work. So how do you behave when you get emails where there's a link that you're not sure if you can trust? How do you behave when somebody asks you for some information that you shouldn't necessarily give out? Those are the sorts of behaviors that we're looking for. And then a positive behavior that we really, really want to encourage is things like reporting. So always making sure that people share things that they see happening. Knowledge is obviously what we need to have in order to behave in those ways. So in our wider cultural context, we know about the laws and the regulations that, that we need to follow in society. And the same in cybersecurity. We need to make sure that people understand how to follow the company security protocols. But then we also need to make sure people understand how actually like social engineering and phishing work and how people might be looking to manipulate you in order to get information. And then there is attitude. And attitude is a really interesting one because attitude is very much internalized. You can't, in the same way as knowledge, for example, teach somebody attitude. It needs to arise from within. Our attitudes are things like, it's almost like our moral compass. It's a sort of network of values that we live by in our society, in our culture. And when it comes to cybersecurity, sort of attitude that we're looking for is this like internalized vigilance and this experience that your behavior, with the knowledge that you have a real impact on the security of your company and yourself. These things together, I think, form a really good framework for thinking about how cybersecurity culture manifests itself. So, how can we change culture if our culture isn't where we want it to be or we don't feel like we have a security culture in place? There's definitely a wrong way of doing it. Like, you can never force culture change upon people. You can't ram it down people's throats. There's definitely a time and a place for things that are mandatory. So there's certain things you have to do, like compliance exercises, ticking a box, making sure that people know certain things or certain things have been followed. That can affect the knowledge piece for sure, but it's not going to create true behavior change or attitude change. When we think, for example, in terms of security training, how traditionally it's been done, we see a lot of stuff that's not relevant or personal. It's kind of blanket approach. Everybody gets the same sort of phishing simulations, for example. That could be really difficult for one person and really easy for another person and totally irrelevant to somebody else. Also, we see like trainings happening annually or quarterly, which is really not often enough in order to create any behavior change. Again, yes, we may impact the knowledge of people, but it's not going to create any behaviors or attitude changes. And then finally, it's normally really focused on failure. So even in a lot of companies, like you have mandatory security training, and if you fail, as a punishment, you need to endure more security training. Sounds really horrible and boring, and most people don't like that. We actually know from behavioral science that focusing on failure just leads to more failure because people will disengage. They will start missing things, they will just skip through things. They won't create that behavior or attitude change. Also, people engage when things are boring or they feel like it's irrelevant for them. Unfortunately, cybersecurity is not for everybody something that they feel is that relevant to them or their day-to-day work. And we all know knowledge doesn't really necessarily translate to behavior. I think we all sometimes do things we know we shouldn't, so it's as much applicable to cybersecurity. So how can we then change security culture? One thing that's so important is to make cybersecurity into something positive. Like, yes, it's super important that people understand the risks. People need to be aware of what sorts of threats can come into your company and how, with your own behavior, you can impact those things. But you need to really make sure that people understand the benefits of their behavior, of how behaving in certain ways, they can actually be a part of the solution. Cybersecurity is a serious topic, obviously, but when we're trying to engage people in this topic, we need to make it fun and we need to make it different. As I said earlier, it's not something most employees across the board think of as something that's relevant to them. So you really need to connect with something that's different from, let's say, normal corporate trainings that people just really just try and get over and done with. And finally, you really need to make it personal. So not only do you need to help people understand like how personally it can impact them, but also a lot of studies have actually shown that people feel happier and more engaged when they feel like they have the locus of control to impact the things that happen around them. So it's so important that people understand the part that they play so they can take responsibility for that. Another aspect underpinning the cybersecurity culture or having a good cybersecurity culture is the concept of psychological safety. It's absolutely essential in any good culture, I would say, but it's a really key part of creating a good cybersecurity culture. Basically, when you have psychological safety in your organization, it basically means that people aren't afraid to share things that they think, that if they make mistakes, or they're not afraid to ask quote-unquote stupid questions. And when you have psychological safety, in terms of cybersecurity, what you get is people reporting things that are coming in that might be dangerous. They're not afraid to report something if they're not sure about it. And when you don't have psychological safety, the kinds of things that can happen is, for example, somebody might, and people do this all the time, and it's going to happen in your organizations as well, give out their passwords or download some malware. And when something like that happens, what is vital is that you find out about it as soon as possible. But if you don't have psychological safety, people are afraid that they might be told off or punished for their mistake. And that is the worst thing that can happen in your organization, because then attacks can come in and you won't know about it. Anything that happens, you really want people to share about it openly. The way that you can foster psychological safety is that you, well, in terms of the making cybersecurity positive as well, you make sure that at all levels of your organization, you talk about cybersecurity in a positive way, but you also share about incidents. So if something goes wrong, you share about it openly. You give people the information about how it happened and how it was dealt with so that they can learn from it. And that way you create a culture where people understand that it's okay, not just okay, but it's vital to share. I want to tell you a little bit about how at Hoxhunt we try and apply these principles into the way that we do, for example, our training, which is designed to create behavior, attitude, and culture change. So we have like a very individual learning path for each person who takes part in our training. So we have AI-powered simulations that are sent to people that are targeted for them specifically based on their, not just their job role and where they're based, but also their skill level. So the training gets harder or easier depending on how well you do. Our trainings are like micro moments. They always take like around 1 minute or less than a minute to complete. It happens round about every other week. So it's not like a training that takes part separately. It happens all the time in the midst of your normal flow of work. And it's gamified. So our users really love that element. Basically, whenever you report any of our simulations, which is obviously the behavior that we really want to encourage, people get stars. But also when they fail, they get an opportunity to take another micro training where they can understand why. The simulation, for example, could have been a malicious email. They're learning. But while they're learning in their sort of moment of failure, they get a positive reinforcement back. And that's really key for creating engagement and creating a positive attitude towards their own locus of control on cybersecurity. Then we have a leaderboard, which people love. There's a lot of internal, very friendly competition in a lot of our customer organizations. Some of our customers even give out actual physical prizes to people who do well on the leaderboard. So that, again, creates a lot of really positive, fun engagement for people. You also get instant feedback anytime you report a real threat or a simulation. So you really learn to understand why it is. And then, of course, we close the loop by providing all the data and reporting and all the information about how the behavior is actually changing through the training and effectively then lowering the human risk in the organization. So we obviously want to keep ourselves very much in check, making sure it always works. And actually, something we did just a couple of weeks ago is we ran this huge benchmarking exercise called the Hoxhunt Challenge. So we sent out a simulation to nearly 600,000 employees in 125 countries to try and ascertain like how well the employees that were in the Hoxhunt training were doing versus the employees that were not in the training. And what we were looking for is effectively resilience. And what that means is an organization's ability to withstand a possible malicious attack. And we measure that by looking at the activity and the engagement of the user versus their good behaviors, so reporting, and their bad behaviors, so failing. And we used actually a QR code-based simulation. It's a highly trending attack at the moment. Hackers are loving it because people scan it really easily. People aren't so vigilant because it's so easy just to get onto a website. So we saw actually lots of those. 22% of simulations last month in October contained QR codes. So we chose that because it was highly relevant. I actually am not going to have time to go through all the results. I want to share a couple of key points from this. But basically, what we found is that the employees that were in the Hoxhunt training were 12 times more resilient than those who were not. So they were a lot more able to withstand attacks in those companies that had the Hoxhunt training. And after 18 months, they were 3 times more likely to report. So if they were in the training for 18 months, they were 3 times more likely to report any of the simulations. That just shows that after using the training for a longer time, the engagement really goes up. We have a really interesting report with all the data and all the results over at our, we have sofas right at the end of the corridor if you want to come and talk to me after this, or our wonderful resident CISO advisor, Petri, who's also here. Petri, do you want to give a wave so people know who you are? This is Petri. So we have case studies printed out that also shows by like job role, location, industry, how people actually did. It's a really interesting reading. So come and talk to us if you'd like to find out more. Our customers are finding the same thing. Just one of our customers, the UK-based law firm Bird & Bird, they saw their resilience ratio go up by 6 times in the 18 months of training. But what makes me and us the happiest is this quote that he sent in to us, saying that for them, the biggest surprise and the best statistic about Hoxhunt is that people love it. And that is essentially the core of how we're able to create that behavior change and create that attitude change and create that culture change, because we're able to get people along for the ride using these techniques. I think my time is about to be up, but I'd love for you to remember 3 things from this talk today. Number 1, continuous training of your employees decreases your human risk. Training, in order to create behavior change, needs to be continuous, not annually, not quarterly, not every so often. You need to do it continuously. Second, you really truly need to engage your people in order to change culture. You cannot force culture change ever in any context. And third, positive reinforcement always works better than punitive approaches. Nobody's going to get on board if you're trying to constantly punish them for their failures. I hope you've gotten some pointers here today about how you can make security more positive in your organization and some techniques that you can use to turn your greatest risk, your people, into your greatest resource. Thank you very much.